Have you ever had an idea that seemed good at first? Maybe a bit funny, and then when you start acting on it, the whole thing crashes and burns. Yeah, that's the run you're about to watch, because during my pirate vs. ninja playthroughs, I learned a little something about the crossbow. Turns out, if you don't have the strength to wield the weapon, then it gives a unique animation every time you try to fire it. And, I'll be honest, I haven't been able to stop thinking about this goofy, flailing crossbow shot ever since. So I thought, well, let's run the intro. Howdy, I'm Prakuza, and welcome to DevBox, where today I wanted to ask the question, is it possible to beat Dark Souls with a crossbow that I don't have the strength to wield? Yeah, this question has a few more facets to it than I initially figured it would, and I gotta say, I was not prepared for exactly how terrible this run would be. Before we start, we'll lay out some ground rules. We're doing an any percent run straight to win as fast as we can, and anything goes in terms of what I need to do to make this build even remotely viable. That includes skips, glitches, and by the end of this, a lot of soul duping. Mostly for arrows, but also, well, we'll get there. For now, let's get into the run and find ourselves a crossbow. The first most obvious crossbow to go for is the light crossbow. This one can be found in Undead Burg fairly early on by heading down past where the undead merchant is and taking a ladder up to this roof and jumping over into the adjacent building. Up here we can find our light crossbow, the first of 3 weapons we can access for now if we're willing to do some skips. And honestly, I like doing 2 of these skips anyway. They have a really interesting effect on opening up the entire game right from go, so let's get into it. Next up is to grab the heavy crossbow, and this is gained by performing the depths skip. A very easy skip that takes almost no time to actually get right. Alright, that might not have been as easy as I made it sound, but once you actually get the jumps right, it's a quick matter of climbing up on this ladder, which is done by turning around while performing the animation to climb up over the top. Then from here, we can roll over the battlement and keep going forward until the floor loses collision. Now from here, the best bet is usually to use what the community has lovingly named the meme roll, by putting on enough armor to hit the base limit for being mid-loaded, somewhere between 25 and 30% equip load. This then lets us drop down on top of the starting area of the depths, as rolling while at this specific equip load allows us to continue rolling for as long as we have stamina, and we will retain our iframes when the fall should otherwise kill us. There is also a way to land on the seam of the first level of outer wall below that will let us get down without the meme roll, but the meme roll is simpler and easier and funnier to say. After we're done rolling around, we can make our way to line up with the door that leads into the depths and jump the opposite direction. Doesn't have to be a jump, but it feels cooler. Then this next one does have to be a jump, as we go flying past the corner where Laurentius is being held, and then the next area will load in under our feet. It's a lot of flailing into the unknown and hoping that the floor will be there to catch us, which it isn't always. Finally, we need to jump up onto this hallway and fall off of the right side here, which will let us walk around and easily drop back down into the world. I love this skip because it shows exactly how interconnected the world is, with all of these layers stacked on top of each other in the 3D space. Like, even by today's standards, the idea that there is no load screen that would disconnect Undead Burg from the depths is breathtaking game design. And this was done on a PS3 or Xbox 360. So cool. Anyway, this whole trip ends with us finally getting our heavy crossbow. Honestly, the better weapon than the light crossbow in about every way. Almost makes grabbing the smaller version feel like a waste of time. Oh, and speaking of waste of time, while we're here, we also pick up the large ember. It will never be used. And now we can head out to grab our third crossbow, which is the final one we can get without heading all of the way into the Duke's archives, which there are some skips that we could do to get there now, but after doing that once for the Moonlight Greatsword video, I don't really want to bother with Duke skip again, especially not on controller anymore. For the current target though, we need to go do Sen's skip. This one is pretty simple. Lure one of the hollows from outside of Andre's workshop, stand somewhere between these 2 pillars and wait for the hollow soldier to attack. Get a parry and riposte with your fist in order to enter the death cam. Positioning is very important here, as going too high up the stairs won't trigger the death cam, and going too low will actually push us through the death plane, which kills us outright. Need to get that sweet spot right in the middle. Then we run back towards Andre, down the stairs, and across to Sen's fortress in order to get past the gate, which isn't loaded in right now. Once we're inside, we get the Sen's fortress text on screen, quit out, and reload, and we're behind the wall once it actually loads in. Two things to note about this skip. One, if we rest at any bonfires while in here, then we're stuck until we kill ONS, so we aren't looking to rest anywhere. B, if we die, Homeward Bone, or use the Dark Sign at all, then we'll be sent back out of Sen's fortress with the gates still in place. Which means we'll have to redo the skip to get back in if there's anything that we missed. Which happens. So yeah, congrats, I get to do this skip twice in a row. Once we are in here, we can take this time to do two things. One, we can grab the sniper crossbow, an admittedly terrible weapon that might not exactly be an upgrade from the heavy crossbow, and the second is soul dupe in front of the crestfallen merchant to buy his entire stock of arrows and upgrade materials. I grab a bunch of large titanite shards while I'm here because at this point I wasn't sure what my actual path of progression was going to be on upgrading the weapons, but it's the green titanite that really matters for this run. For an explanation on the soul duping, this one requires a little setup. We can start without the setup, but to get the most bang for our buck, we need about 2,000 souls to buy 1,000 wooden arrows. Then we attempt to drop all 999 of them, then leave that menu, line up a soul to dupe at the top of the consumable menu, then hover over brightness and hit select and next page at the same time. On my PlayStation controller, this is R1 and then X at the same time. On an Xbox style gamepad, that would be RB and A. It's also not exactly the same time. It's one after the next in quick succession, and the timing is different from system to system. Having done this on Switch and PS5, the more powerful system can move a bit faster, so our inputs also have to be a bit faster. So it can change depending on the power of your rig or what console you're playing on. I'll note right now that generally when I start a run like this these days, the intention is rarely to soul dupe my way into a massive level advantage and steamroll the game with nearly infinite health and stamina. It's only when I reach a breaking point that these souls start to go into anything other than consumable materials. Otherwise, having a ton of health often totally borks the hell out of a challenge. That being said, that breaking point does come and go eventually. And at a certain point, the question becomes less, can I win with a minimal or casually realistic stat line, and turns into, can I do this at all, without limiting my soul levels? So if that's going to be a deal breaker when you get there, I'd rather be more upfront with it now than I have been in some of my much earlier videos, where it goes unacknowledged until the very end, and let you consider the run invalid from go, if that's how you feel. And with all of that, we have our starting equipment and can start testing for how we'll be moving forward. With these tests, however, we learn an unfortunate, sad truth about these weapons and how scaling works in DS1. Because it turns out that while crossbows have no scaling after we've met their minimum requirements, there is still a negative scaling if we don't meet those requirements. And that negative scaling is worse the further from the base requirement that we are. This all means that if we're only a single point of strength below the threshold, then we still do about 50 to 60% of the damage that we should be dealing with the crossbow. But if we're 2 or more, then suddenly the crossbow drops down to only dealing about 10% of the intended damage. So yeah, on top of the goofy flail that we'll be doing every time we attack, we also can't deal full damage with each hit. And since the light crossbow has the lowest strength requirement, it is actually the strongest of the 3 bows that we currently have access to. This doesn't bode well for the rest of the run, now does it? Well, at least with the green titanite, we can try to scrape some of that damage back up by upgrading through the magic path with Rickert down in New Londo. It's not fantastic, but it's something. Let's go test it out against a boss, though. Surely this will go wonderfully. So, as we can see with the damage against the Taurus demon, things aren't exactly impossible. right now. I mean, that damage is actually pretty good, thanks to the magic upgrade and an RTSR setup that I did before the fight, but it's still not exactly where I'd hoped it would be, given that mid-game damage without RTSR can often flatten Taurus Demon, if not outright one-shot him. Again, I had initially assumed when I started this run, because I intentionally do as little research as possible before I get deep into these runs, that the damage would be the same as if I met the strength requirement. You know, because crossbows have no scaling. Anyway, the Taurus Demon himself is slow, and we can fairly reasonably bait out attacks that have a long enough recovery to get our full flinching shot then reload animation out. This would definitely be impossible at this rate of fire and damage if I had to be, like, within melee range, since the need to reload after shooting makes this infinitely worse. Still, our range makes this work out a lot better, and we even managed to get a pretty quick win. This then brings us to Pinwheel. Why the fuck is Pinwheel an actual challenge? Like, I get that my damage is incredibly low and my fire rate is terrible, but still, Pinwheel should not be fucking me up this badly. Side note, did anyone else know that Pinwheel even has a second phase? Because he does. At low enough health, he'll despawn all of his current clones, then summon a whole new crop all at once, and all of them seem to attack at a much higher rate after this point. It's crazy because even a bunch of the Lord Soul bosses don't really have distinct second phases, but somehow Pinwheel manages to be considered important enough to get one pre-DLC. Still, this is somehow the most difficult fight so far, and will be harder than Taurus, Bell Gargoyles, and Quelaag combined. Let that one sink in on exactly how insane this stupid-ass run is. Somehow, Pinwheel is the hardest fight we've had so far by a mile. This was supposed to be a quick in and out. No muss, no fuss, jump in, get the Rite of Kindling, and leave. And yet, here we are, resetting over and over and over and over again. And to be honest, I can't even really tell what it is that got me the win in the end. Was it locking in and learning the actual timing of his attacks? Was it a massive amount of luck? Was it having the determination to continue trying for days until I actually got the kill? Not sure. Probably a combination of all three, but whatever it is, we eventually make it through. Next up are the Bell Gargoyles. This one doesn't go as well as the Taurus Demon, but I'm surprised to find that there are plenty of opportunities to actually get some hits in on these two without trading blows. Not many, and most of the damage dealt is in fact trading blows. Still, even with how much these two attempt to overwhelm us here, the fight isn't exactly easier than the Taurus Demon, but it takes less attempts to get through the fight. I'll put most of that on the fact that I've started to get a little more used to the weapon at this point. The learning curve is steep, but at a certain point I got a bit of an inner metronome for the tempo of the shots and the reload. Or, when panic sets in when I get close to dying, spamming dodge after firing at least allows me to get out of the way at the first possible moment and recenter before trying to shoot again. So yeah, half of this is me meticulously timing out my shots and dodges to keep positioned to properly get each hit without taking too much damage in response. While the other half is panic shooting and rolling at the last second, praying to the janked up code itself that I survive. And eventually, I do! Somehow. By the time we hit Quelaag, the fights are starting to get pretty obnoxious. We're still at Magic +5, the strongest we can hit down the Magic upgrade path for now, but at this point we're only dealing about 20 to 30 damage per hit. Given that Quelaag has about 3,100 health, this means that we're going to need at least 100 shots to get through the fight, although the actual total is closer to 150 or 160. Yeah, we're now at the point where we cannot afford to trade blows anymore. Quelaag will always out-tank us, so we need to find the actual punishes that give us enough time to fire the crossbow, flinch, and reload before Quelaag sets up another attack. The forward thrust is the first option I find, as long as I can get into the crevice behind where the spider's head meets its body. This attack will generally take long enough for me to be able to get off my shot and escape without taking much, if any, damage. It doesn't always work though, especially if we get caught on a slope. Next up is the lava puke, specifically the long spew where the spider's head shifts back and forth to leave a massive moat of lava. None of the quicker shots can be safely punished. This does also give an extra problem though, as baiting out this attack, or only waiting for it to spray out, leads to there being tons of lava all over the place and leaves me with very little room to make the distance I need to get a shot or two off. Still, after about 10 minutes of shooting, dodging, strafing, baiting, burning, healing, sleeping, no, not that, some other thing, we get the win. Not gonna lie, getting the bells rung was a multi-day experience. At this point, I was already pretty close to dropping this stupid idea and getting back to the pirate versus ninja stuff. But instead, I took out the ceaseless discharge with the cheese and gave myself enough lingering catharsis to get through the next milestone. But before we head to Sen's Fortress and beyond, we need to beef ourselves up a bit. Next up is the Moonlight Butterfly, which can easily take us down with our health as low as it is now, and gives us basically no free moments to actually get any hits without trading blows, apart from when it drops down to feed on the flowers on the bridge. The extra heals from beating Pinwheel helps us out a lot though. It isn't exactly another days-long adventure like Pinwheel, but the butterfly does still give me a bit more trouble than I would have assumed, especially when I have range on my side. But lining up shots with the crossbow is also a bit of a task, thanks in no small part to Dark Souls' shitty lock-on. The reward for our efforts of taking out the Moonlight Butterfly is the Divine Ember, which has the highest magic attack bonus at +5 since crossbows have no scaling. I mean, it's a gain of about 7 AR, but at this point I'll take what I can get. Fire upgrade could also be nice, but I wanted to stick with magic since there are some bosses with higher resistances to fire or are outright immune later on. For now, this ends our detour for extra strength, and we head to Sen's Fortress to fight the Iron Golem. We already talked about it before, but at this point we've fully established that we're in any percent mode, and since we're already allowing soul duping for materials, Copper Demon and Gaping Dragon really aren't necessary. We'd be spending that on more bolts anyway. But what about the task at hand, the Iron Golem? Well, this is a long road to success, one that for a while didn't look like it would ever actually get there. I will note, however, that this is probably the second most impactful fight of the entire playthrough, right up there with Pinwheel. That's because the Iron Golem really clicks with the same strat that worked back against the Taurus Demon, but elongated in a way that makes him like a slight elevation on that early fight. Even so, this is still a bit of a slog and requires nearly perfect execution for 15 straight minutes before we get through to Anor Londo. And on more than one occasion, my execution fell short of perfect around the 10-minute mark. Which, yeah, for anyone who's done a low damage run of Dark Souls might know, or anyone who's fought Calamite with even moderately suboptimal equipment, dying while that far into one of these elongated fights is devastating. So yeah, we screw up a few times, try again, screw up again, give it another try, and eventually we're through after a massive slog of a fight, which at this point has pretty much completely drained any of that determination I had going that kept me fighting through Pinwheel. I'll be frank with y'all here, what you've seen so far was about a week's worth of recordings with many bosses somehow taking days at a time to beat on their own, which has only gotten us to the halfway point of the game, and I've been realizing, bit by bit, that I'm not that guy. The timing on the crossbow it's too much, and it would probably wind up taking at least an hour to take out either Ornstein or Smo at this point, let alone getting to the second phase. And I don't mean an hour of attempts, I mean an hour per attempt, if I'm using the same process I did for Iron Golem and Quelaag, carefully finding the few openings available and taking one shot at a time. That being said, I don't even know if there are any actual opportunities that are consistently open enough to not be trading blows. In another several hours of attempts against another boss, not a single loosed bolt manages to hit on target without me also taking a hit to the face. Ornstein dodging the vast majority of my shots really doesn't help either. So, instead of continuing to tough this one out and seeing the writing on the wall, we're soul duping to maximize our health and resistances. So this is that challenge failed or run invalid moment I mentioned before, because I go a little ham on the power leveling, taking myself all the way up to 99 vitality, 99 endurance, and even pump my resistance up to the soft cap. No strength though, still gotta keep the wonky flint shot after all. With this, I get to try out a different strategy, which doesn't even work at first and takes a bit of RNG to actually see positive results. The high endurance lets me put on full Havel armor and cast Iron Flesh in order to maximize my poise and defense. The result is that I can basically sit in the corner and face tank ONS's attacks until one of them goes down. Now, does this make the fight easy? Well, it certainly makes it easier, but considering that even with this tanking method, I still managed to die several times, I won't go saying that it's easy. Still, the excessive health and defense is certainly overkill, and I likely could have made it with a lot less. Regardless, we get into phase 2, and I'm relatively safe as long as I consistently bait out Smo's butt slams, which is actually a relatively safe attack to punish. And after another 5 minutes of Super Smo ground pounding, we finally get a win and move on. At this point, I understand most people finding the rest of the run invalid, because obviously the massive health and defense stats are going to have a huge impact on the rest of the playthrough. Still, even then, the struggle is not actually over, and we'll especially hit a rough spot right at the end. In that case, we'll take a slightly speedier approach to when things get tricky again. While the extra HP and resistance means I can be risky against Seath, this is one that absolutely didn't require it. Sure, this turns into another long slog, but pretty much every attack is punishable, so barring some bad positioning that could get me caught with the explosion, this could have gone as well with or without the extra vitality. Next up is a trip down into the Tomb of the Giants for White Titanite chunks and a slab, along with the large Divine Ember to get the crossbow up to plus 10 Divine. Again, this is the strongest magic damage we can do without scaling. As for our bolts, we've recently upgraded to the lightning bolts once we reached Anor Londo, but they're terrible and deal about the same damage per hit as heavy bolts, for 10 times the price. Once we actually get into the Gravelord Nito fight, however, the plus 10 Divine Light crossbow insta-kills each of the skeletons and leaves Nito otherwise defenseless. This is another situation where the HP helps out plenty, but is nowhere near as necessary as it was against ONS, because if we put some distance between us and Nito, we can get plenty of punishes here. Again, the extra HP means that I get to greed a lot more and get this fight finished in one attempt, but it was absolutely doable without the soul duping. At this point, it almost feels like if it wasn't for ONS's double team, this whole thing could have been done at like 20 vitality, even by me. We used the Chaos Servant Covenant to skip Demon Fire Sage and Centipede Demon, so we can get straight into Bed of Chaos. Honestly, nothing about the build really affects the fight, but for some reason, the lock-on wouldn't activate on the final hit, so we gotta free aim that shit. I'd say that Sif is surprisingly easy here, but look at my fucking health bar. I can't lie that I've fallen back on letting my tankiness carry me from here on out, and it absolutely carries. I will say though that this one turns into a lot more trading blows, and I get the idea that this is the first fight where the health bar was required since ONS. Then, for the final Lord Soul, we are up against the 4 Kings, and yeah, there was no way I was ever doing this without the massive amount of health. Could someone else have gotten this done with this little damage and this long of a recovery time for each hit? Definitely. I don't encourage any of you watching to try, but yeah, anyone with a little more patience than me could probably get this done if you're willing to throw a few hours at each boss attempt, and probably for multiple days in order to actually get the attempt that wins. Although, things will get hairy here, because even if I'm able to fire as wildly as possible, we still get a total of 7 Kings, with 4 floating around in the last phase alone. Yeah, I'm not that guy. Vitality me up, baby. And now we've finally arrived to Gwyn. This is insanely difficult, even with our ridiculous health bar. For one, Gwyn is already the toughest fight in the base DS1. And for anyone who doubts that, since parries tend to make him so free, try fighting him without a shield next time you get here. He input reads flash chugs, he has multiple gap closers that can knock you on your ass if you're not wearing heavy poise armor, his combos are incredibly powerful and continue on forever. Oh, and the hitbox on his grab is silly. For our purposes today, parries are still required, as the opening is the only time that we'll be able to actually get a hit off on him, even though it's still trading blows, even with the parry and the way that Gwyn always dodges to the side if you shoot him with a ranged weapon. It's possible that dodging the grab could also give a decent chance to hit, but it still doesn't stop the traded blow, and we won't deal the additional instability damage we get after the parry. So parries are still the way to go here. Altogether, we only survive this because of the massive health bar and 20 S discharges. And even then, there's also a great deal of RNG on display in the run that finally gets us the win. So, could this have been done without pumping up my HP? Definitely. Could I do this? No. But it was still a wild and fun build. The moment that the Iron Golem clicked for me was exhilarating. That's like the whole reason I do challenge runs in the first place. Also, getting an actual fight out of Pinwheel was so odd and confusing. I could imagine this fight actually being something more worth remembering if getting overwhelmed like this was a more likely outcome with more casual weapon choices. So yeah, even if I did have to pump my HP like crazy to get the win myself, I'm still really happy with the oddities that this experience offered. Hey, it's that time again. The end of the video where I invite folks to come check out the Patreon. Link in the description, and make good on the rewards for those currently pledged. Patreon members get early access to new content and their names written in the credits at the end of videos. And those who pledge in the top tiers get their names read out loud, like our DevBox designers, Genghis Braun, and our DevBox developers, Azul. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching.